ANA eLearning Academy is brought to you by CDN Graysheet, a trusted source of rare coin and currency valuations since 1963.
Thank you for joining us today for the ANA eLearning Academy. The ANA would like to thank our eLearning partner Graysheet for their support of the eLearning Academy. Today we have George, who will be presenting on the standardization and quality control of ancient Athenian coinage. You will be muted for today's presentation, so if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I will read them to George at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, here is George.
Thank you very much, Logan. Let me share the screen first. So hopefully you can see the screen. Today we're going to talk about standardization and quality control in ancient Athenian coinage. That's a very interesting topic for me, since it is it combines my profession with my hobby. So my hobby is coinage and my profession is engineering, and I participate on many standardization organizations in the States and globally, including International Organization of Standardization. So it is really fascinating to explore all of this interesting world and going back in history and seeing how thousands of years ago people were utilizing very similar principles like the ones we are using today, and how those principles were evolved through time. So today, here it is, ancient Athenian coinage and standardization. And this presentation is has as a subject to study on the coinage standardization and on the methods of quality control, and how in ancient Athens they used those techniques to identify fakes and to protect the consumer in reality. So after all, the principle of standardization and quality control in ancient time was exactly the same as we do it right now. Protect the client, protect the consumer, protect the citizen. And through this presentation, we will go through exploring the Athenian law on silver coinage, the material testing methodologies, that they were used during that time. And I will show you also relatively, let's say, rare to find special documentation. That time documentation was written on inscriptions on the marble. So we're going to have the opportunity to explore also a few very rare samples that they are available. So what is standardization first? When we say standardization, and this is modern world definition, is the process of making something conform to a standard. So whenever we want to conform to a standard, we're going in the process of standardization. And you may ask, okay, well, what is a standard? Okay, standard is, it may have many different meanings. We may have standard as a document, as I told you, an inscription or a rule or a regulation, that it is established by a subject matter expert or experts. It is approved probably by an authority, a regulator, and it provides guidance on the design, usage, or performance of materials, products, and processes. So this is a standard, but is this the only standard? Not only. For example, in metrology, which is the science of measurement, when we are talking about a standard, we don't only talk about a document that prescribes rules how to approve a product, but we are talking about actual objects or systems, as we call them, that they have a specific relation to a unit of measurement of a physical quantity. This could be, for example, length, area, mass, weight, volume, time, currency, money. So those are the historical standards, and nowadays we extend them. Okay, we may include energy and other issues, but at the ancient time, they had metrological standards in addition to the documenting standards, and those standards were related to this exactly elements that I mentioned you, length, area, volume, and so on. For example, in the picture here, you can see some ancient Greek bronze weights were used as standards for weight, that they are coming around 500 BC, and they were found in Athens on the ancient Agora. Agora was the market, the ancient market. So they were using those standards as measuring of weight, standards for weight in ancient time. Also, in order how we're going to guarantee that when there is a standard, a written standard, a rule, a regulation to comply, that we still comply with that, we are using another term called quality control. What is the quality control? It's a system of maintaining standards in manufactured products by testing a sample out of the output against the specification. So if we say this is a reference material, or this is the specification, the reference standard, we compare that probably with the new product, the new manufactured product, and if it complies, then it is passing the quality control. So these elements, these terms that I mentioned you now, they were used in ancient time exactly the same way as we are using them in the modern time. The difference now, they are much more complex and much more enriched with many different elements, but the logic, the principles remain the same. And as I mentioned you before, one type of the standards were also the monetary standards, reference money. And based on that reference, the whole monetary system of an ancient country city-state was developed. So the monetary standard refers to the set of monetary arrangements governing the supply of money. And who was providing this supply? It was provided by the city-state during that time. And those monetary standards were different per city, considering that the ancient, the area that it is the modern Greece, that it was the ancient world of Greece and so on. There were many different small cities, states. They had their own monetary standards. For example, on the picture, you can see here the monetary standard of Aegina. Aegina was and is an island very close to Athens, that it was an independent state, and they had their own monetary standard. You see this one with a very popular turtle, the turtle coin. And that time, there was always a reference. The main reference had a name. It was a stater, or drachmi. And there were denominations in the system of the monetary standard, either multiples or subdivisions. We will see later on exactly how was such a standard was structured. And in this presentation, we will work around all the different phases of standardization in ancient Athens. So we will not only talk about the monetary standards, but we will see how standardization was achieved through the testing of materials, and how standardization was achieved also through other elements of coinage, for example, through legislation, how they were checking for fakes also. Because in order to identify a fake, you have also to first to define what is your reference and compare, and then define if a coin is fake or not. So if we go to the Athenian monetary standard, considering that it was one of the most popular during that time, before we start and explain you about the standard, I would like to give you a small backup information how the ancient drachma was developed. So what you see here on the top is a bunch of bronze, I could say, spits, bronze copper spits. Actually, this is the actual picture. And this is here, you see how somebody could grab those sticks. So in a period before the development of the coins as we know now in ancient Athens, they were using those spits of copper or bronze as money. I could say pre-money. Actually, what for they were using these spits in the actual life? It was these spits were like raw material. So they were, when they were creating the metal, they could make it in the form of a spit. And then in a high temperature, then they could melt it again and create different I don't know, spoons, whatever they were using in everyday life. So that was used as a reference material at that moment because it was the main speech. And at that time, six speech were considered as 1 drachma. And what was drachma? Drachma is a word coming from the Greek verb drato, which means grab. So the human hand could grab 6 speech. So 6 speech were 1 grab. And 1 grab in the Greek language is drachma. So the word drachma, as we know it now, comes actually from the actual motion to grab those speech, and those speech were called oveli. So obol, as we know that now, that 1 drachm has 6 obols. In reality, is 1 grab of metal pieces, of 6 metal pieces. So we see everything has a history and goes back all the way to, we're talking now about 1000 BC. 1100 to 750 BC, that was between late prehistoric age and early archaic age. That they were using those type of speech as coins, or as I could say, as a part of their everyday life on monetary life. Those real actual oveli, obols, ancient obols, you can find them today, and you can see them at the Numismatic Museum of Athens. So all you that you are friends of ancient coinage, I suggest you that if you have been in Athens and traveling there, go and visit the Numismatic Museum. It's on the center of the city in a very beautiful neoclassic building, and you can enjoy many interesting coinage, let's say, coinage that you can find and see and enjoy over there. Now, if we go back, this is the history, how we define drachma and how we define obols. If you go to the Athenian monetary standard as was involved on the classic period, you will see that the main definition is here. Where is my cursor right now? 1 drachma corresponds to 6 obols, and the drachma is 4.3 grams of metal, which is consists mainly of silver, and we'll see later on about the chemistry of the coinage. So the most popular tetradrachm, as we know now, which is everybody knows around 17 grams, okay? It was 4 drachma based on the definition of the monetary system. So we have the drachma, didrachm, 2 drachm, tetradrachm, which is 4 drachms, decadrachm, which is 10 drachms, okay? So this is going up, and if we go down, we have obols. So 1 drachma has 6 obols, and then a tetrobol, it has 4 obols, a triobol 3, and diobol 2 obols. And then there is obol, just, and there were even smaller denominations, the tartimorians. The tartimorians mean even quarter of an obol and going down, all the way down. So that's the logic. And for you guys that you are not so familiar with grams, this is the correlation between grams and ons. So you can have a clue what we are talking about. So that was a standard, the monetary standard of ancient Athens, very popular, and copied around the East Mediterranean Sea. Now you see on the map here the typical state cities and the regions of the classical worlds, and I would like to show you that the Athenian monetary standard was not the only one. So the Attic standard, Attic is Athens, okay? It is the region around Athens is called Attica. So when we say in reality Attic standard, we mean the Athens standard, the monetary standard. That was the most popular, but also there was the Achaean standard. Achaia was a region here on northern Peloponnese, where is the modern city of Patras, and they had their own standard. Okay, over there it was not drachma. The main reference unit was tether, and it was around 8 grams, and it was divided in 3 drachms of 2.6 grams and obols of 0.4 grams. Then the famous Aeginetian standard, the one I mentioned before with the turtle, actually it is here where you see my cursor. Under Athens, over here, there is a small island called Aegina, and they have their own monetary system, also popular, 12.4 grams, that was divided in half stater, that it was the drachma, 6.2 grams, and so on. Another also very well-known system was the Chian standard, Chios here, which is also an island state in the ancient time. And that area of the world, where is the Ionia and where is also Miletus, here, Miletus, all this area, were actually the area that the coinage first was evolved. So the Milesian standard and Chian standard were very old standards, even older from Attica standards. And the first coinage we know very well, they come from Lydia, this area here, that developed the first coinage. And they had also their own standards. So there were more. There were not only those ones, but I just want to show you some of them and compare them also with the region, with the map, to have a clue how was ancient world on that area of Mediterranean was evolved and how the city-states looked like. Now, if we proceed more on the more actual standardization, what you see on your photo is the first documented on marble standard of modern technology. I don't say that there were not others, but we say this is the first saved. It goes to the 4th century BC, and it was found on Elefsis. Elefsis is a city very close to Athens, a few miles west of Athens. And this specific stele inscribes a standard technical specification on how to build, how to create, how to make bronze dowels that they were placed between the marble pieces of the columns of the buildings in order to enhance their stability. Let me jump to the next picture. Here it is. You see here the columns on the ancient buildings. You can see a building, an example here. In Elefsis, for example, this was applied on the building of Telesterion, which is like the church, let's say, one church in ancient Elefsis. And you can see in the middle, actually the columns were not a uniform piece. It was smaller cylinders, smaller cylindrical pieces like this. And then they were placing one on the top of another. And in order to achieve stability, they would put in between this small cylindrical metallic piece, which was called polos. So polos was placed in between two other smaller cubical, let's say, metallic pieces that they were called empolia. And those empolia were placed inside the marble. So this structure could not allow the pieces of the column go right and left. They could be stable. They could remain stable. So this specific stele inscription describes exactly what are the specifications and what is the composition to develop these small cylinders that they were placed between the drums of the columns during the ancient construction. And if you go and visit in any area around in Mediterranean where there are old buildings like this, you will see that now that the columns are dropped down, you can see the pieces, these small squares in between them, that those metallic parts were placed there to facilitate the whole structures. So, and this stele, this prescribes the specification concerned about the chemical composition and the manufacturing process of the bronze, those bronze fittings. So it is, we as engineers, we are really excited that we found that archaeologists found, that document, that stele, that inscription, that it is exactly under the same logic that we are using the standards today. So if you get a technical standard today, you can see also about describing the chemical composition of a product or the dimensions of a product which is supposed to be a standard product. So, and this not only describes the chemistry or dimensions, but also describes this standard, and says actually to shape hard bronze into the lathe, into cylindrical dowels according to the particular sample. So we can see also the manufacturing process, that there was a lathe that was involved in the manufacturing process to develop the metallic part for this specific construction. That was a sensitive part of the construction. That's why there was a specific standard. So it was really fascinating to see that the way that we are thinking now evolved exactly from the way that the engineers thought 3,000 years ago. And we are following up their steps actually in the modern work. So you see here the actual photo of this construction, where you see here the polo. Polos is the cylinder, and you see here the empolia, the fittings between the marble, and this marble is like a piece of the ancient column. So you had now the opportunity to go with me through the first documented standard, a technical standard that it is existing. And it is not only limited to describe the process and how it looks like, but it also proceeds or chemical suggestions of the standard, and it says exactly in the text, the ancient text that you see here in Greek, it says in English, the translation, the copper must be produced in Marius Cyprus. That time, Marius Cyprus was a large metallurgical center in antiquity, and it should be consisted, be careful, by 12 parts, 11 were to be copper and 1 of tin. So which give us approximately composition of 92% copper and 8% tin. So it was very, very precise on the composition. And that's also the modern standards, they do the same thing. Metallurgy, they provide you exact, not only structure, not only geometry, but also specific, how specific chemistry on how to deploy the metal part, how to construct it, how to make it. So this is really interesting. And that concludes the first part of the specific technical standard. But now I will proceed to the next one, that we are merging the logic of standardization with the coins and the coinage quality control, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. And here you can see another stele, another inscription also on marble. This comes from Stoa Talos. Stoa Talos was close to the downtown Athens, the ancient Agora, the ancient market. And this stele describes in details the famous law of silver coinage of Nicophone. And this is dated going back to 375 to 374 BC. So this inscription is complete. So archaeologists are very happy about that inscription because there are no missing parts. So they can read it very well. And the topic that it is covered by that inscription has to do about the quality of the Athenian money supply, about the regulation, how to regulate the everyday transactions of coinage, and how to enforce contracts related to usage of coinage. So this law, the Nicophone law, declares that approved, and in order to be approved, they go through a process that it is described. In order to approve Athenian silver coinage, is to be accepted under threat of severe penalty, and provides for experts, that they call dokimastes, to assay coins in Athens and in Piraeus. Why also in Piraeus? Because Piraeus was the port, and it still is the port of Athens. So it means the ships were arriving to Piraeus, and the first commercial transactions were taking place in Piraeus. So because Athens didn't want fake coinage to to go through the city, they had also a unit of dokimastes, of assayers, of people that were doing quality control in reality, controllers of the coinage on the port. And also there was the main center of quality control that it was located on the ancient Agora, the ancient market of Athens. So they had two units of controllers, one on the port and one in the market on the city. So the responsibility, according to Nicophone legislation or regulation, call it whatever you want, was given to the dokimastes, that they were the experts to identify and remove counterfeit coins from circulation by a series of checks that I will explain you later on. And also it was their responsibility to approve the appropriate coins that can be accepted and they can be placed back on circulation. And when they identified the counterfeit coin, a fake coin, they had to cut it across, you see here, this cut. And they were dedicated usually in the sanctuary of Sibyl, which was the mother of gods. Now be careful. We know from our collections that there are many coins with cuts. In general, when the coin was fake, the cut was all the way down. Because later on, we had, or during that period, small cuts that they were done by the people that were not sure if it was a fake, just to understand if it is just a plated coin or it was a real silver coin. But when you see all this line, when the cut it goes all the way, it means that the coin was identified from that time as a counterfeit, and it was removed from circulation. So you see here two Athenian coins, and one real, one counterfeit, and you can see the cut right across, which shows exactly, it is easy to understand which one is the counterfeit. Now, how they did it, how they measured it. The methods of the quality control of the new coins, there were different references. And the more technical approach was using a scale like this. This scale is not from ancient time. There are references in ancient texts that I found in a special paper by Professor Varoufakis of Athens Technical University. But this specific portable scale was much younger specimen from the Ottoman Empire period. But it is because from the descriptions we have, it is expected that even the ancient one would be very similar. So what is this? The method of control incorporates this specific tool that it can measure the dimensions, the diameter of the coin, and also the weight, the expected weight. So it's like a small balance and dimensional scale simultaneously, used specifically to measure coins and identify coins' mass and dimension. So if the coin has the correct weight, then it would be, and the correct dimension should be considered as an authentic. If the coin was not correct, it means probably that it was lighter, which means it was copper coin, that it was silver plated, or it was heavier, which probably was a lead, that it was plated again with silver. And then scratching that also, they could identify that. The other typical method of testing a coin, which is even used from the experts even up to now, was the sound of the coin when it is dropping. This in our engineering world, we call it acoustic emission technique. So it is understand from the sound of the metal what is properties of this metal. This method is described on the play, on the famous play, The Frogs, from the Aristophanes. Aristophanes was a famous writer of plays, mainly comedies. And in his play, The Frogs, he says that he's mentioning that the sound of the authentic coins is described when they strike a hard surface as kekodonismena, which means as ringing sound, having a ringing sound like a bell. So this method is very ancient. It is also described on ancient comedy. So the authentic coin should pass the quality control procedure that it could include sight, touch, and sound. So the experts, δοκιμαστές, they had to observe the coin, either it was silver or gold or copper or whatever. They had to feel it through their sensitive, experienced fingers, hold it in their palm to estimate weight and use probably the scale I did show you before, and then also leave it fall on a hard surface and listen to its sound. So with this combination of methods, they could identify the quality, the material of the coin. I would like to add, I forgot to mention that those δοκιμαστές, the quality controllers, they were not citizens, they were slaves, but they were very well-educated slaves that they were specially used for this specific action, and they had many privileges very similar to the free citizens, except of voting. So the Nicophone law, the regulation of Nicophone, that it is described on the second inscription I did show you on the stele, it has a total decision tree. It describes exactly what is the decision tree in order to approve the coin. I'm not going to go, we don't have to go time to go one by one, but I will show you on this PowerPoint and the next one, the main steps. And this decision tree is a very detailed, as we call it, process today. I would call it as an engineer SOP, standard operating procedure, that you have a flowchart in reality of all the potential checks and all the outcomes you may have, and then the decisions you have to take. So in this graph, whatever you see in gray boxes with boldface are actual decisions made by the quality control experts. White boxes is possible policies, what will happen if they are rejected, and italics are the consequences. What is the cost to individuals and to the Athenian state if the fake, for example, would allow to go through? So this is a very structured way that a regulatory document is constructed. I mentioned before that it is very important to show you that the whole emphasis on the quality control was important, especially for Athenian coins, because if you see some statistics from archaeological findings, you can see that in general, the Athenian coinage with the Syracuse coins were the most popular in the ancient world. And you see in the hoards that the archaeologists were found, 5th and 4th century, when they include even one coin from that city-state, and in 4th century, more Athenian coins are, but the total number becomes less because there are many more countries, more states producing their own coins. And this is about the actual number of coins, the statistics. If you see, for example, from all the hoards that the archaeologists were found and they are included on this sample in the 4th century, 6% everywhere in all Mediterranean were Athenian coins. And then we go to 1.3 from Taras, which is in Sicily, 1% of Corinth, and close to 0.7 from Syracuse. The rest is other coinage from other city-states. So you see that the Athenian coin was something like what we say the dollar today, okay, that it is, you can find it all over the world. And it is, of course, there are local coins, there is high volume of local coinage, but if you go through all over the world, you can find dollars everywhere. So that was the situation on the ancient time, and that's why Athenians were very careful to protect their currency and throw away the fakes. So when they proceeded, the quality controllers, with the classification of the coinage, they had 7 categories. They could classify, and they were classifying it in 7 categories. The prototypes was the authentic, actual coins that they were issued by Athens, and they were cut in Athens, and it was the real silver owls, as we call them today, the prototypes. And then we had the artistic imitation or medallions that they were issued for special occasions, but they were clearly distinguishable from the prototypes. And they had different functions as religion or for people who were dying to put it on their tombs and so on. I did a few months ago a presentation about Haron's coin, that I gave you examples of artistic imitations and medallions that they were used only to place them with the dead in the tomb. Then we had the official plated and the debased coins. There were some official coins from them. That was called the emergency Athenian war issue. So when Athens sometimes had war and they didn't have enough silver, they could produce those coins that in reality they were bronze soles, and they were plated by silver. But when the war was over, then the city didn't want to keep them. So they tried to collect them and remove them. So during the quality control of the dokimastes, if they could find official plated but plated coins, they would also remove them. They will not keep them. And then they had the anonymous imitations that they were copies of the silver rolls that they were produced somewhere else as fakes. But many of them, there were many of them that they had the actual amount of silver. So they could relatively good, let's say, copies. So at that case, it was the decision of the dokimastes, of the quality controllers, if they will keep it or not. They had the right, according to the law, the inscription we showed before, to keep them and consider them as acceptable. And then that they had the other category was the marked imitations, that there were also special symbols of them, countermarked or whatever, mainly produced also in other areas of the world, that in most of the cases those were not accepted because they had different weight or they were not sure about the metal used. The perfunctory imitations that were real junk, okay? And it was very easy to understand that it was a fake. And the counterfeit plated and debased coins that also were in purpose manufactured as fakes, and also they were removed. So here you can see some examples of those categories I just mentioned. So you can see the prototype, an original silver roll that it was issued in Athens with a typical 17.2 grams of weight. You also here is another prototype of that. 3 is an official plated coin, a marked imitation, number 4, a perfunctory imitation, number 5, and a junk full imitation fake, number 6. So all these coins could be part of the game. Now, just to conclude what I said before, the output of the process, according to the Nicophone law, could be either certify and approves. They call that documon. Documon means that it is good enough, and it can remain in circulation, and then it is expected mandatory acceptance by the market. As long as the quality controllers, the dokimastes, say that this is documon, so it is approved and certified, then it goes back on circulation and it is a good coin. Then there was the xenikon. Xenikon means foreigner. Xenos is foreigner. It was considered as good. The silver had the appropriate quantity and the weight and diameter. And it was called also kalon. Kalon in Greek means good one. It was then certified by the controllers. It could remain in circulation. They could return it to the owner, but the acceptance was optional because it was not official documon. It was not certified Athenian coin. It could circulate in the market, so it was not illegal, but it was depending on the persons that were dealing if they would accept it or not. And then we had the unacceptable coin, which was called bad. And then in that case, is this one that they cut it all the way through, they confiscate and dedicate it to the temple. So it was not a good one, not used, it is removed from circulation. And then also there were the foreign xenicon. Xenicon, we said it's foreigner, but it was bad. In that case, again, it was the junk fakes that they will cut it, confiscate, and dedicate to the temples or throw it away. So make it again melt or whatever. So that was the, let's say, the judgment matrix, and that was the 4 potential actions of the δοκιμαστές after the quality control process. So those were the outputs of quality control process of the coins. So you may ask me, okay, how this standard, this Nicophone's law looked like. So this is, in purpose, I wanted to give you an actual part, not only listen to me, but listen on the voice of the ancient legislators. I'm not going to read you the Greek one, but I will read you a small part of the actual text of how it is written on the law, word by word. And they say Athenian Atticon silver coin shall be accepted by all sellers of goods when A, it is found by the approver, the quality controller, to be solid silver, and B, has the public stamp, which is the public approval. Number 2, the public approver, δοκιμαστής, shall sit between the bankers' tables in the Agora, in the market, and approve coins on these terms every day, except when there is a deposit of money, state revenue payment, in which case he sits in the council building, which called Vouleftirion, which is like parliament, what we say today. And then, if anyone brings forward to the approver foreign xenicon silver coin having the same stamp as Attic coin, so it is kalon, good, as I told you before, the approver shall give it back to the man who brought it forward. So they will return it to the owner because it is kalon, it is good. But if it has a bronze core or lead core, or it is fraudulent, kivdilon, then the approver shall cut through it immediately and shall be confiscated as sacred property of the mother of the gods, and he shall deposit it on the council of 500. That was the parliament. So in reality, it goes to the temple, not used, not circulate anymore. So you see here the wording of the ancient standard, how it was written, ancient law, how it was prescribed. You may also ask, okay, we call it Nicophone law. Who was that guy? Who was Nicophone? His name is included, is mentioned on line 2 as the person who structured this standard, this legislation, but unfortunately we don't have enough historical evidence because Nicophone was a very usual name. So the historians who did the search say that there are a few possibilities. We know around 14 Nicophones that lived on that time in ancient Athens. The most likely candidate is Nicophone Timagenus Thimakievs. That was his name. He was a member of the parliament in 367 to 366, and he is also well known for some dedications he did to Athena. As a member of the parliament of Athens at that time, he had the authority to establish such a law, such a rule. So probably that's the most possible person. Of course, there are some other contenders that they include Nicophone Athmonevs, who was an epistatis, a controller, close to that period. So as a controller, he may suggested something like this. Nicophone Ivadis, who appeared on a similar list on the 4th century. Nicophone Acharnefs, who was lived and buried in Salamis that period, and possibly in Nicophone Theron, who was a well-known comic poet, and he was contemporary of Aristophanes. But the most probable is the first one, because he was a member of the parliament and he could, in exactly the same time. That's just an idea from curiosity to know who was this Nicophone guy. And for my last PowerPoint, I have here some pictures of how ancient Agora, the market, looked like. So this is a reproduction of the ancient market of people selling, talking, and so on. Here is how it is today. This is a part of the ancient market. Here you see the map And this is this specific building, which is saved today. I could say that that was like an ancient mall. It was full of small stores inside, people selling different products. And the people that they were going on the center of the city, they were going to that building and call it market, Agora, at that time. So I would consider an ancient mall, looks like a mall also. Here we can see a depict of a people giving money to buy a product, a transaction, monetary transaction. And here are some of the coins that they were found on that region exactly. And I am sure that some of them probably went through the typical quality control of Nicophone. So that's how it looked like at that time, how it looks like now, that period. And I have also some references, and that concludes my presentation. Also, I'm showing you here a modern euro. I won't say that the silver owl of Athens is still living, and it is living in the core of euro. So you know that in European Union, the coin is euro, and every state, every city, every country now, they are issuing their own coins. So this is the euro, 1 euro coin from Greece. And inside, it is exactly a copy of the ancient owl as a remembrance of the most common and most well-known ancient coin in at least East Mediterranean area. So thank you very much. And I will be happy to discuss with you and if possible, reply to some questions. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, George. That was a wonderful presentation. If any of you have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A so that I can read them to George. And we'll give it a few minutes to see if anybody has questions. Oh, here's one. How do they assay the silver content? ASSAY?
Okay. From the information we have, the process was, as we call it now, non-destructive testing. It means that they didn't do chemical analysis because probably they were not in position, but they used the combination of the methods I told you, acoustic emissions, dong dong, drop it down and listen to the bell. Also use the scale I show you. So measure the dimension, measure the weight, and measure the and listen to the sound and feel the coin. Don't forget also that in that time the metallurgy was not so developed, so the state had much more advanced and complex metallurgy methods. So the most common fakes were just silver plated. So even if they could scratch a little bit, or if they could understand from the weight, so all those are called indirect non-destructive methods to get a feeling, and we are using similar methods today on engineering.
Okay, the next one. If cut bad coins were donated to the temple, how did some get out for collectors today?
Oh, yeah, sure. Because Athens was only a small part of the whole ancient world, but Athens coins were circulating everywhere. So Athens had developed this control system. And first, it does not mean that all the coins went through this control. So probably there are many thousands of coins left outside of the system. But the most important, these coins you could find in Corinth, you could find in Crete, you could find in Ionia. So over there, they didn't do this control. So it would be very easy to have fake coins going around. And some of the ancient fakes we are still finding today. So it was easy. It would be the wonder if no fakes could go through.
Yeah.
But the Athens, because it was the center of the monetary system, they had this method. They developed this method to protect their coinage. But I don't think that it would be possible to protect from everything because it was a very widely used coin all over that known world. So it would be impossible. And you know how many really ugly fakes of that time they are still existing today, and we are collecting them because they are part of the history. Those coins could never went through Athens, and they could never reach the quality control points in Piraeus and on Athens.
Okay, we'll do one more. Did the amount of silver decrease with time?
Yes, that's true. And inflation was part of the ancient world. Okay, so the inflation was created not only by introducing more coins, by introducing also not clear coins. Because it's supposed to be that when the coin is made from silver or gold, the value of the coin is reflected through the coin by itself. But what happened is in many historical periods, even in Athens, as I told you before, during the war, they issued coins that they were lead coins and they were silver plated. This by itself, it can create inflation. So, and we know later on in different historical periods that different leaders, emperor, kings, they were start mixing silver with other metals in order to make the price, create more coins, increase the quantity, and using less silver. This creates inflation in reality. So the value of the coin goes down.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thank you again, George. It's a wonderful presentation and very informative, and we've gotten lots of compliments in the chat and Q&A on it. And I'd like to again thank Graysheet for making our e-learning academy possible.
Thank you
guys all
very
have a
much, and I appreciate that you invited me, and I had the opportunity to share my views and my little knowledge with all of you.
I would say it's more than a little, but you have a great day, and everyone else as well.
Okay, it was a pleasure to join you.